Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of One in a Million podcasts. So we are one of many, but today I have a new guest on here, Abigail Enos. I originally talked to her during Club Fest because she was representing I don't know the exact name, but it was a club for legalization of
Yes.
marijuana in Iowa.
So first off, I will say I actually use they them pronouns. But
Okay.
That's okay.
Oh, my apologies.
all
My
right.
apologies. Sorry.
So I'm the president of the Iowa State chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Law. We just abbreviate it to NORML. It's kind of a mouthful. But NORML is a national organization, as it kind of implies, and they do a lot of different things to push for cannabis legalization. Like their website is always full of really interesting news. So if you're into it, it's a great place to go. Here on campus, we don't do quite as much. It was an interesting transition, went from me to the previous president's whole thing, but I'm here now, and we have big plans for next semester. So,
Are you allowed to say them? Or?
yeah, we want to do more educational events and tabling. We love a good protest. We did a protest earlier this year in spring semester, and it was so much fun. We had a huge blast. When we were walking along Lincoln Way, we got so many honks. People, it made me realize how much people want cannabis legalization in Iowa.
Wow, okay. And so what is the current state of legalization and then in the nation and then in Iowa?
So federally, it's illegal. It's a Schedule I drug, which is the government defines as no medicinal use, which that is nonsense. You may have heard that Biden actually called for it to be considered to be rescheduled, that would make a huge difference. But it's entirely criminalized at the federal level, and in Iowa, it's also criminalized. We're a state where you can get any quantity of cannabis. You can get up to 6 months in prison, and I think a $2,000 fine for a joint in your pocket.
Wow.
So it's pretty scary. I will say I do want to do a disclaimer. If I'm talking about consuming cannabis in any way, I'm talking about hemp products, just for legality reasons. NORML does not condone anything illegal. I do not condone anything illegal, and I don't do anything illegal.
For someone who's extremely uneducated, who would be me, what is the difference between hemp and then
So it's
any
the
other?
same. It's all cannabis. It's all under that plant, but there's different types. So hemp is non-psychoactive. So there are cannabinoids that you can extract from hemp, like CBD, but it's not going to get you high, and that's actually fully legal, both federally and at the state level. I purchased some CBD oil from a company that they grow it near here. I could drive and go see it. So it's completely legal. Anyone can have it. You can have it on campus, as far as I know. That's not legal advice.
What does it do if it doesn't?
So CBD is, I've described it to people as, it's like weed without the high. It's because a lot of people use cannabis medicinally. So it's very calming. I use it personally for my anxiety. It helps with I have gut problems, and it helps with my gut problems as well. But it's very, it's super helpful, and it helps a lot of different people. There's been studies. There's actually an FDA-approved drug that has CBD in it, and I don't remember what it's called, but it's for treating seizures. So there have been studies that have shown that CBD helps with reducing seizures, and there's a lot more that it can be used for. It helps with pain, anxiety. These are not, a whole list. But it's not the government. Unfortunately, our scientific mechanisms are still, okay. A little bit of background here. I don't know if you have much experience with research, but I do. That's my job. And I have just picked up a lot of information about how you get funding for research and all of these things. And first off, I have mad respect for scientists and researchers out there, because the amount of writing you have to do is insane. But a lot of research funding comes from the federal government, and they won't fund things that are illegal. So we are only just now, within the last 5 years, getting research on hemp. But everything that is showing that it's extraordinarily beneficial. In the past, when we weren't criminalizing this, hundreds of years ago, we would feed cattle with hemp. Actually, no, this was more recently than hundreds of years ago. There's actually a Hemp for Victory program during World War II because hemp can be used to make rope and fiber. So, and you can take the leaves of hemp and turn it into silage, and it's fantastic cattle feed. It's very high in protein and all these other nutrients. And I have not, this is hearsay, but I have heard that humans could consume the CBD like secondarily through the animal's meat. Okay. So it's, which like that makes sense. I feel like maybe there is research. I don't know, but it makes sense to me. So it's just a very beneficial plant. There's a lot of things you can do with it, and I also think that it's going to be a big factor in helping with climate change because it doesn't need much water. It's nutrient fixing in the soil, and it's extra. I mean, they call it weed for a reason. It's like if you ever go out in the country, you'll see weed in the, like grown in the ditches. You can't smoke it, but it's actually plants that escaped the fields during the Hemp for Victory program when we were growing hemp in Iowa. So it's very weedy. It's hard to kill. So, but it's easy to grow.
And so you're saying that hemp is legal right now. And so like all of these good things about it, I think that's kind of a victory, right?
Yeah. For sure.
And so yeah. I guess so the fight is for like the next step.
For THC.
Okay. And so for the THC, what does THC have to provide that hemp like does not provide?
Well, it gets you high.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's that's a big part of it. Humans have been doing stuff to get high since we've been humans. We love to drug ourselves. It's just a fun thing to do. And I am of the mindset that people should be able to put the stuff in their body that they want to, which, that's maybe like my opinions on that go to a pretty significant extreme. And I don't know enough about drug reform for other drugs to go into that more, but
by extreme, you'd mean that like there are harder things that you could
decriminalize all drugs.
Okay,
I don't think anyone should be in jail for drugs because you would have to be an idiot to say that the war on drugs has worked.
Yeah.
So, like, the government has spent massive amounts of money on it. Our prison population is swollen. People are suffering. And instead of punishing people because addiction's a disease. I myself have an addictive personality. I've had interesting relationships with legal cannabis before.
Hear that, cops?
If you're the government. But there are actually, an interesting recent development is you can take cannabinoids derived from hemp and synthesize them into things that are psychoactive. So they're technically legal, but I've tried them before. It's not the same, but they're still out there, and I do know people who do quite like them. But yeah, it's what was I saying? Okay. I don't think we should be putting people in prison for having a disease. You wouldn't put an alcoholic in prison. You wouldn't put someone with mental illness in prison. It's a disease. And if the government wants to help this, they need to address the problem, not punish people for it, if that makes sense. But my thought is, why not have a central some sort of authority producing these clean drugs for people, because it would put these cartels out of business, and it would also mean less death. And it would if people had to come to some sort of central facility or something to come get this, they would be going in contact with harm reduction people. And like I said, I'm not super knowledgeable on this, so I don't want to go.
I think correct me if I'm wrong. I think that is kind of a bipartisan idea that the war on drugs has kind of been a waste. And so I guess what most people would ask you then, so if you think that a lot of these drugs are very addictive, especially like with alcohol and like harder things, like things that the cartel may be, struggling and whatnot. If you were to legalize, though, you would also try to push for help.
All that money that we're spending on punishing people could be spent on helping people.
Okay, and so you would say that those people should get help.
No, they need help. Like it's not a good place to be. I have previously struggled with illegal cannabis dependency before, and while cannabis is not chemically addictive, And that is one thing that I don't think people quite understand. You cannot chemically get addicted to it, but behaviorally, it's habit forming. It's super easy to come home and you're like, well, what else do I do? Like I struggle with that all the time. But
Very glad you mentioned that.
It's not going to kill me.
Yeah.
Like the worst that can happen is I'm like, if you go cold turkey off of weed, you're going to have trouble sleeping. You're going to be grouchy, like super grouchy, appetite issues, but it's not going to kill you like a lot of other drugs can.
And you just say though that it's like a kind of an unhealthy life decision to like be consistently using.
Well, it depends on the person because there's medical patients who need to use every day.
Yeah. Besides that, just I mean like recreational.
Moderation in everything is important.
Yeah.
You can get addicted to anything that releases dopamine in the brain. So it's instead of punishing people, we should just be encouraging people to have healthy usage habits. And like in the long term, I don't know if you read this on my questionnaire, but my hot take was alcohol is more harmful than cannabis and more harmful than cannabis ever will be. And I firmly believe that. Yeah, and I know, especially around here, people will get pretty aggravated at me for that because the drinking culture around here is pretty pervasive. But
yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah. Where did that come from? So where does that stem from, and why do you think people have an issue with that?
Well, it's cultural. There's a lot of different reasons. You know, alcohol, it's been acceptable for a long time. Like it has been criminalized actually.
Yeah, that didn't go too well.
Prohibition did not go very well. And it's like, I don't have an issue with people who want to do what they want. Like I said, I'm actually socially pretty libertarian. I don't care what people do. Like as long as it's not bothering me. But the thing is at a certain point, sometimes drunk people do bother me. Mm-hmm. Like I was talking to my mom about this last night, but like just the rate of like sexual assault and like all the terrible things that happen in drinking environments, it's not a substance that puts people in a headspace to grow, to be chill. Like it's not. Yeah. I don't enjoy hanging out with drunk people, and I have found that people who base their social lives off of that are not fun to hang out with. That's also kind of true with cannabis, and I'm finding that a little bit now. But alcohol is just so much more pervasive. And also it's, from my understanding, when you're drinking, you're kind of microdosing poison.
Yep.
And that's fine.
Yeah. I try to stay away from quoting the science of it, but like, I could agree with you that makes, especially like the liver and like just special. And I think the bigger thing with the difference between like alcohol and marijuana is that like you said, like marijuana in general is, behaviorally addictive, but not chemically addictive. Alcohol is both. Yeah. And so like you're instantly going to struggle.
You can get an alcohol addiction and you can overdose on alcohol. We have not found the overdose threshold for THC.
Really?
The scientists have dosed mice with like 2,500 milligrams of THC, which for reference, the average edible dose is 5 to 10 milligrams. And these mice survived.
Wow.
Now there are like, if you have an underlying heart conditions or anything like that, it can cause issues. I actually met a guy who, he has one of those underlying heart conditions. Like, oh my, like I feel so bad for him. But if you are like an otherwise healthy person, you're not going to overdose on it. Now, this is not an invitation to go out and take 2,500. Do not do that.
To eat 40,000 edibles.
That will not be good for you. But it's safer. You're not going to overdose on it. You might have a panic attack. You might have some mental health things, but it's not going to kill you.
You might throw up a ton also.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a little confused as to what like your personal stance on like THC and then hemp is, like, because it seems like you're conveying that it is behaviorally addictive and that you should. Does that mean like you should stay away from it, or does that mean that you should just like watch that be? And then one more question,
go ahead.
So you can answer it all in one go. Okay. Where does hemp versus THC, like what are the differences between the two in how you suggest people use it?
Well, hemp and like CBD is not habit forming. It's like you're not getting high from it. So it's habit forming in the sense that it can help treat your pain, and that's a habit that you're going to take it to treat your pain, but you're not taking it for like to numb out.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
Which that's a big thing with cannabis is I've met a lot of people who like, and with me, like myself, like when I'm going through something, it's legal, the legal product is, it kind of just lets you get out of your head for a while. And alcohol is similar. And like I said, with anything that releases dopamine in your brain, it's important to go into it mindfully. It's being aware of yourself and what your needs are and like what your threshold is and where, it's individual for everyone. And I'm not going to sit here and tell people what that is. All I'm going to say is you need to be mindful about it.
Do you think it's easy to be mindful about that, or do you think that it's kind of difficult to?
Unfortunately, actually, I think it being illegal makes it harder for it to be mindful about it because I've noticed this with myself. Like, if I had access to the product I wanted and I was able to do it in the way that I wanted, I would be able to have a better relationship with cannabis because I could figure out what works best for me. Where having it being illegal, it creates this extra level of stress around it, and it's like, it's hard. It's hard to do. And I know I'm moving to a legal state eventually. Actually, recently, this was last night. I had a conversation with my mom. Hi, Mom. She's going to watch this.
That's so adorable. My mom.
And I was talking, like, I've lived in Iowa almost all my life. And I struggle here a little bit. But I realized that, like, I could transfer earlier. I was originally going to wait until I graduated to leave. But I'm considering moving to Oregon.
Oh, okay.
Which
nobody's ever heard of Oregon before. Like, no, it's Wisconsin or not. Well, Wyoming is the one that nobody ever hears. Oregon and Maine are like Wyoming, Oregon, and Maine are like the three that nobody ever talks about. But continue.
See, in my communities, a lot of people talk about Oregon, but
really,
but yeah, because I have heard multiple people say that the best weed that they've ever had was from Oregon.
I think that's different in friend groups. I think that's really cool to get that perspective.
I have met a lot of people. Like, that's one thing about. There's something about people who are drawn to cannabis and like what it does. I watched this is a Vice documentary, but it was they were filming people who worked in the industry in California, and there was a woman who was running a farm, or she was a trimmer or something. She said cannabis is feminizing. And not in the way that it's not in like a way that some people would use it as like a negative way, but it's introspective and it makes you realize like how it kind of helps with the ego a little bit. It's not going to do ego death like maybe some other psychedelics would, which cannabis is not a psychedelic, but whatever. But there's something about it that's just like you chill out and like you realize how little things matter. And you're like, oh, like things become, more trivial. And it's like, why am I getting so stressed out about this? Why, like, it's just something about it makes you chill out. It's relaxing.
Yeah.
And being around people who have been through that experience,
they're generally like more relaxed.
So some of the
calmer.
coolest, most accepting, interesting people I have ever met are through NORML and through the cannabis community. I have never met a group of people who are like more accepting of my queerness and like who I am as a person. Just so, like you can't be judgmental and smoke weed. That's not.
Those two just don't happen.
They're not compatible with each other.
Yeah, no, I have definitely heard that, and you can see that in. I mean, that's how they're portrayed in movies. That's how everyone I've met is like. That's just like. I think it's a commonly known and accepted fact. Like,
it's a very
most
healing
are
plant.
Going to be like chill.
Which, interestingly, the herb, like the actual bud that you're smoking, it's the female flower of the plant. Male plants, they actually throw away in a grow because they'll pollinate the plants and you'll get seeds, and you don't want seeds in your weed. I had a friend message me on Discord, I think, and he was like, "Oh my god, my joint just exploded," and I was like, "Dude, you got a seed in there because if you get a seed in your joint, it'll explode."
Yeah.
Just because it's like popcorn, the same. There's liquid in it. Yeah, it works the same way popcorn does.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so if you ever are smoking a legal CBD joint and you, which you can actually get CBD flower, and I've used it before, and it's really nice. It's I'm not getting into terpenes here, but there's benefits to actually having the compounds that occur naturally in the herb. But it's you don't want to season your weed. And but the female flowers, like I feel like something about that is there's some symbolism to it. I don't know, like you're only growing the female plants, like how feminist, like oh my gosh, girl boss.
The most progressive plant on there. That is cool. I'm learning a lot, by the way, just from having this conversation.
Yeah.
I wonder where, so you say that like it should be taken in moderation and there is like a healthy amount. Where do you think those lines are? So
it depends on the person. It really does.
What, is there a way that like you could have a conversation with somebody and then you'd be like, okay, you went overboard? Like what would be some of the things, or like if they're telling you about their experience with like CBD, any of that?
So I want to clarify that this is specifically with THC, because I have never heard of someone developing a dependency on CBD.
Okay,
it's like ibuprofen. Like you're not. It's kind of a similar. It actually works a little bit like ibuprofen. Sometimes better. But you know, if you're having muscle pain, like you can buy CBD rubs. It's a painkiller.
Yeah,
you're not doing CBD for fun.
But with the THC, where do you think?
So it like I said, it depends on the person. A lot of times when it starts to inhibit your daily function, like your ability to function as a person, it affects everyone differently. But I know in my experience, if I consume too much, I actually do lose motivation. Like not everyone loses motivation when they smoke. Like that, the lazy stoner stereotype is not 100% true. But with me, if I consume too much legal product, I do. Like I just don't want to do anything. So that when I start feeling that, that's a sign to me where like, oh, I need to step back a little bit. I need to, wait till later in the evening, or I need to skip a day. And it depends on the person. Some people, when it's, I guess I can't speak for other people, but if I'm, not dealing with stuff emotionally, if I'm not doing my chores at home, there's many different things. But if someone came to me and asked, I would first say I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a therapist. A therapist would have go see a therapist if you're watching this.
Yeah. No matter what, just go see therapy. Unrelated to THC.
Go to therapy. But I would try and be like, so do you feel like it's inhibiting you? Do you feel like you're smoking weed and sacrificing things to smoke weed? Are you spending too much money on it? Like it's many things, but it just requires a level of reflection and mindfulness.
Do you think that mindfulness is like easy to accept about yourself, or could you see people struggling to admit that it might be inhibiting some of their daily?
Well,
because I know if it were me and somebody was like, hey, like this is hurting you, and I can tell, like I'd be like, no, it's not. Like, you don't know me. You know what I mean? Like it would be difficult. Do you think that exists with other people? Or?
It does. I've met people where I realized like if I told them that you're smoking too much weed, they would probably stop talking to me. But that's okay. Like it's not my job to go around telling people that that this is a purely individual decision. And because in the long run, like I said, what's the worst that's going to happen if you're smoking all day, every day? Like you're lazy, you sit around, like you gain weight, like you don't get your stuff done. I mean, it's not going to kill you. Whereas, if you drink all day, every day, you're going to pickle your liver. So I guess if you smoke it, which there's other ways to consume cannabis that don't cause lung damage, but smoking it can have lung damage. Like, there was a time when I took a 2-week break. And I developed a cough because your lungs develop a mechanism of healing itself. But I have a personal theory. This is entirely hearsay. There have been very few studies on this.
It's really nice that you're able to admit that about what you're saying.
This is bro science.
Yep.
But I will say the power of anecdotal evidence is underrated.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think that there's compounds in it that maybe mitigate the lung damage a little bit. Now, it's still not good for you. You should, if you smoke a lot, you should maybe consider doing other things. But I don't think I don't think it's as harmful as maybe smoking cigarettes.
Yeah, I hope not. Yeah.
But it's just an individual choice, and honestly, life's too short. Like, we're all gonna die anyways. You know, if that means we're gonna have some lung damage, like that's your own decision. Me personally, there is. This is like getting really in the weeds here.
Aha,
But there's this, it's dry herb vaping. So instead of burning the herb, you heat it up, and all the cannabis, like the active compounds, vaporize out of it, and you don't get the tar or like the effects of it burning. Now that can still be a little hard on your lungs, but it's way better for you.
Yeah, it's just a step
It's
up.
vapor. It's like water vapor.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that where it can start to be irritating is the heat can get a little intense if you do it too hot. But it's a fascinating aspect of cannabis consumption, and I've experimented with it a little bit, but I do enjoy it. When I moved to a legal state, that's what I'm gonna be doing. I love me a good dryer vape. If anyone out here is into this, love me a Dynavap. So, which I won't go into that.
Yeah, you'd be talking to the crowd on that, on that one.
Yeah, that's a little. That's well. Also, it's getting a little bit into condoning usage. And
Yeah. So this is the question that I've been trying to ask pretty much every guest.
Okay.
How does, so like particularly with like cannabis in general, so like how do your opinions on this issue serve you? So like how has it made you a better person, a worse person, like whoever you are, like how has it shaped you? And why would you encourage other people to share your views? Like how will it change them if they believe
it's made me less judgmental. I come from I'm a religious trauma girly. I was raised around, not entirely in, but my dad is a member of a pretty conservative group, denomination of Christianity. It's called the Church of Christ. It's not very well known. There's not very many people in it, but it's similar to Baptists. And one thing that I have found with that is it's judgy. I can't talk to that part of my family because, I mean, look at me.
If they saw this podcast, they'd freak.
They're pretty judgmental, very, very, very conservative, and they kind of feel an entitlement to push that onto other people. So I internalized that, and I am still deconstructing judgment, like that judgment, because it creates that. It creates a mindset where you feel a need to criticize everything. And there's a lot of things that could go into that. And my mom could actually talk about it a lot better, because she's actually, I have to shout out my mom here. My mom is going to college at the same time I am.
Wow.
She's the mother of, how many siblings do I have? 4 kids. And she's studying social work right now. And she is the most badass woman I've ever met. But she could explain this a lot better, because it was, social work, they have the language to do this. Hi, Mom.
What's your mom's name?
Samantha, or Sam.
Shout out to Sam.
But yeah, she's one of the reasons I'm here today. So,
I mean, literally, but
she pushed me, maybe a little too hard sometimes, but it all ended up fine. Oh man, but she has a lot better language to discuss it than I do, because she was also in it for much longer. But it's it just creates this very judgmental mindset, and I found that cannabis and like consuming that's one of the things that it just kind of makes go away, because you realize we're all meat sacks trying to do our meat sack thing on this earth, and we're all human, and we're ultimately aiming for the same thing. And it kind of brings you back down to realize like who you are and who other people are. Or this is what I've experienced. Not everyone experiences this, but I have met a fair amount of people who have.
I've heard something similar. So preach.
And so consuming it and like having a relationship with it has done that, but also the legalization, like the rhetoric around it, kind of mirrors that. And like I said, like most. If you smoke it, a lot of people are like, why is this illegal? Because it's healing. It's super healing. Like, man, when you're having a hard day and you feel terrible, coming home and being able just to relax like that and take that load off is incredible. And not have the negative effects that alcohol does is it's a tool. It's a fantastic tool for that. Now, like I said, it can get to an unhealthy level, but I know with my experience, using legal product in for that purpose is very helpful. I deal with a lot of anxiety and depression, and it's like being able to take a break from that. It's a game changer.
So I have a couple questions of that one beautiful way to put it. But
thank you.
I do have some questions that might be kind of hard questions to answer, but what I'd ask first is, do you think there are other ways to get that kind of effect?
Oh, for sure.
And in what way specifically did like your opinions on marijuana help you with those? And was it more of an escape from it, or was it more of a way to like challenge those thoughts, challenge the way you grew up?
Like consuming cannabis?
Yeah, like did it help you like come up with a way to mentally, overcome this, or was it kind of an escape?
Well, it's both. I have used cannabis to numb out before, but I've also used it to be more reflective. It depends on the product that you're using, the strain, a lot of different things. But, I've sat down and, after taking a legal edible, and, been really reflective and been able to think, like I've had significant realizations. It's not quite to the same level that like shrooms or other psychedelics would give you, but it's still, if you go into it with the right mindset, it can be. It can be. I healed my inner child with weed. This is crazy, and I'm gonna sound like a nut, but whatever. I'm already sound kind of crazy here, but I had an experience where I felt like I was meeting my inner child, and also weirdly enough, my dad's inner child. So that's a lot to unpack. I won't unpack that here, but like just being able to connect with that aspect of myself, because we all have an inner child, and we all, we all have a kid inside of us that just needs, something. And if we can get, and if we can give them that, we're giving ourselves that. And and weed has helped me to do that. And weed has helped me to unpack a lot of trauma and a lot of things that hurt me. I have a protest sign that says weed saved my life. And I think it did. I have a genetic predisposition to depression. And one thing that I have struggled with in the past is some pretty significant like suicidal thoughts. I've never gotten to the point where I was actually going to do it, but it was like present. And once I started consuming legal cannabis, those went away. It stopped. And I was given like just this, it took that immense amount of pain that I was feeling. And I was like, whoa, like I can handle things now. And I still feel that way. And even like when I stop, when I take a break, I still feel that way. Like it's just so and you can find many other people who could tell you similar things. It's super healing. It puts you in a situation where you feel a lot more, I don't know, reflective.
And so, again, greatly put. And so when you are smoked or when you are high and you have those thoughts that kind of help you heal, those still continue when you were not smoked. So do you think if you stopped right now, you never smoked ever again, would those thoughts last for the rest of your life? Or would you think so?
Yeah, that would stick with me. Especially if you write it down. Like if you journal, because sometimes it does impact your memory a little bit. And my memory is not good in the first place, but if you write it down and you especially even better, if you go to therapy and talk about this stuff.
That was my next question.
It's like if you take this and you're like, look, I've gone into therapy and be like, look, I smoked and I had this thought and I want to talk about it. And they're like, okay, and it's fantastic. It's a tool. And it's not going to heal you without other work. I had to put in significant amounts of other work to make it work for me, but this work would have been way harder if I didn't have cannabis to use, to give me that space.
I will admit, I've had conversations with people with stoners before, and they have said a lot of the same things that you're saying, but without this kind of more, what am I looking for? In honesty, without kind of a dependency talk. And so they talk about it like, I do need it. I can't do it without it. Stuff like that.
I could do it without it, but it makes it easier. So why would I make my life harder?
Yeah. So to have this conversation with you, who you're like, it took work outside. It does help me when I'm not high. And if I stop now, I would still have those forever.
I would still have those benefits.
You still have talked to a therapist. You still have you have said that, hey, I do these things and it has helped, but it helps when I'm not doing it
Yeah.
as well. Because that's like, I think that's the big question that anybody that kind of has an issue with getting high, the question is always going to be like, do you need to do it? You know what I mean? And so for you to have this conversation and say these things without even me asking, that's like a really good sign for me.
Yeah.
To like have a conversation with someone if you need that validation. From
No,
me.
well, thank you. I put in a lot of work because like I said, I have an addictive personality. And if, there's an aspect of me where I could smoke all day, every day, just be high all the time. I think I'd get kind of tired of it after a while, but there is that urge there. And, humans are pretty simple creatures. Like we love our dopamine. We love our, we like to feel good. And you can see many other cannabis dependency is, I would honestly say it's pretty similar to someone who has like a porn addiction or has like a bad relationship with video game addictions, things that aren't chemically addictive but habit forming. I don't know very much about porn addictions, but I have heard, I do know it's a thing.
Yeah.
And it require they're not morally bad. All of these things are amoral, but it's how we interact.
Yeah. It's like the dependency on it is the issue, not the thing.
Not the thing.
Yeah. And I can completely understand. Like I said, it's a very wise thing to communicate because, like I said, I've had conversations with people who do not communicate it in that way at all, and so it's a very responsible way to talk about it because it's like I understand that it does have healing effects, but I also understand that it's as bad as like
it can. I have met people who I'm like, you smoke way too much. Like you need to go outside and stop smoking. But I've said that I've been there too. I'm like, sometimes I'm in a situation like I need to stop. I need to take a break because when it gets to a point where you're no longer addressing things that you need to, that's when it starts to get difficult.
Yeah. So I would you suggest this? Would you suggest the THC to somebody who maybe isn't necessarily running away from an issue or isn't like struggling with something that they would need the help with it? Would you suggest THC to somebody who's in a position where it's like, I'd rather handle these feelings on my own, or I don't really
I would
have
suggest weed to
struggling with
anybody.
right now?
I think anyone can. I'm not saying everyone has to smoke weed. Like, make your own choices, but I think it can benefit everyone.
So in what ways would it benefit somebody who maybe like isn't necessarily
everyone has
struggling?
issues.
Everyone does have issues.
Everyone has issues. It is part of the trauma and pain is part of the human experience, and we cannot escape from it. And that is one generalization that I can make. And the way that cannabis leads to this reflection, if you go into it with that attitude, you will benefit from it. Like if you go in like, okay, I want to see how this makes me feel. I want to see, what thoughts I have with this. It's honestly kind of hard to describe. And like I said, the effects it has for me is not going to be the same for others. But okay, I guess I should say, if you have a family history of like specific mental illness, like schizophrenia or other things, it can actually cause issues with it can. What's the words?
Enhance.
Yeah, it can make the paranoia and psychosis worse. But other than that, I shouldn't say everyone can benefit from cannabis. I'd say most people can benefit from it.
You could benefit even if you think that you couldn't.
I think if you think that you couldn't, you would benefit more from it. Because I have seen so many people. I'm like, you just need to smoke a joint and relax. The first person that came to mind is Kim Reynolds. She's very anti-cannabis. She's the reason that cannabis is illegal in Iowa. We have tried to pass bills before, and she has vetoed them. She does not like weed. I don't understand why. I firmly believe that Kim Reynolds would benefit from taking an edible or something and just experiencing this. Take a small one. You don't even have to get that. Kim, if you're watching this, you don't have to get that high. She's not watching.
Yeah, so we're gonna add her in there.
Yeah. We'll add Kim Reynolds.
Kim Reynolds. I'm gonna get her on the podcast with you.
I would be. That might get bloody. I have a lot of strong feelings about her, but.
Try to construct the argument against making cannabis legal. So
a lot of it's racist.
Really? Okay, why would you say that?
Race was the main reason that cannabis was made illegal. For example, the term marijuana is not the proper name for it. That's an outdated term. So marijuana is the name that Mexicans used for it when it was being Mexican immigrants, I guess, were using for it at the time. And the government started, or the people trying to make it illegal started using that to freak white people out, like to cause racial fear. Because truth be told, before it was made illegal in the 20s, people were using it all the time. You could go to the pharmacy and get cannabis extract, and people would just use it for its many medical uses. Like, we have known the medical uses of cannabis for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
Wasn't it kind of similar for cocaine as well, at a certain point?
Yeah, but cocaine is a little different.
Okay.
It's cocaine is addictive.
Yeah.
So I would not put those two things on the same level. But it was a very common part of life, but not smoking it. But when they're senators who were voting to ban cannabis didn't know that marijuana and cannabis was the same thing. So that's one of the reasons I don't use the term marijuana, because it has that racial connotation. You're not racist if you call it marijuana, but it's something to know.
Yeah. And so do you think that that's still a reason why there's legislation that there is still racially so
oh my gosh, yes.
What in a modern day sense would why would you say it would be racially?
A lot of people have internal biases. We all do. And when those things are not addressed, would you believe me if I told you that all races use cannabis at a pretty equivalent level?
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people don't think that. A lot of people, it has racial connotations, and I don't need to explain those. You probably can think of your own.
Interpret.
But when you haven't confronted your racism and you associate and you have these racist ideas and you associate for example, if you associate weed with Black people and you have this internal bias towards Black people, it's a thing. Not to say that it's bad. I don't think Black people are bad.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm trying to say here.
Clip
But
that.
Don't take that out of context, please.
For some reason, I've always associated it with white people only because of Seth Rogen and James Franco. I don't know why. That's just always been how I've associated with it. A lot of people do
not share that.
I don't. Yeah, that's it's an interesting perspective.
And it's also a classism thing. That cannabis is associated with poor people too. That
would be much more what I would move towards rather than the racial element of it. It's also really much harder to, on a statistical or systematic way, to really pinpoint that as it. I definitely believe it exists, but it definitely wouldn't be what comes to my mind firstly if I were to try to construct why people would want to illegalize it.
But a lot of it's also just pseudoscience too.
That would be the bigger argument.
Okay, there is actually one argument that I actually think is pretty compelling. I don't think that this is a reason it should be illegal, but it's an important question: is how do we regulate driving under the influence with it?
Yeah, that was.
And I don't know.
I'd imagine it'd be, in my opinion, to be in a similar way that we do it with alcohol.
Yeah,
some sort of test.
But there's no field test for it. There's no blood alcohol contest.
You're gonna have them pee in a.
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, and the thing that makes cannabis different from alcohol is at a certain level, if you have enough alcohol in your body, you're gonna be impaired. But some people can, people's tolerances vary wildly. Some people can smoke a joint and be, high for all day. Some people can smoke a joint and then and go drive and be just fine. And that sounds scary, but they're not impaired. The thought that I've had is an impairment test.
I would think an impairment test, or it'd be more so about the way that they were driving, more so than them being it'd be an extra added. It's you were driving unsafe, you also happen to be high. This should be a sign that maybe you can't handle it as well as some other people can. It's that would be where the issue is. It'd be the same with alcohol. You wouldn't get pulled over if you were drunk driving if you weren't driving bad. Not to condoning drunk driving, but
Yeah.
like, you know, you get pulled over because you're bad driving.
Yeah, like there's lots of people who drive. I've met people who say that they drive better. Stuff.
Which is the stupidest thing. I'm not even gonna get into that.
I don't know how I feel about that, but like,
And for me, it'd be the same thing with like if you were driving under the influence, if you were high while driving.
you
it's like,
shouldn't drive high.
yeah,
That's
it's
stupid.
it's the same thing. I'd feel there wouldn't be a field test though, and I do agree, like trying to do something that's more like impairment based instead of like chemically.
But that's one of the only compelling issues that I've heard with it. And I don't think that's a compelling enough issue to make it illegal, because there's another substance that's legal that does actually cause.
That's what I was saying.
Quantitatively, like a lot, immense. I mean, if we cared about substances causing death, we would ban alcohol.
Yeah, it's definitely, you'd want to treat it in the same way as alcohol.
Well, actually,
Well, in a similar way, in that
yeah,
like
well, yeah,
it should, if you were to make it legal.
in terms of driving, at
Yeah,
least.
like if you were to make it legal, it'd be the same as alcohol. Like you should be a certain age to take it. You should not be driving under the influence, but it's legal past that point. You know, and some areas could say like, hey, you can't smoke here. I feel like most people would push for it to have kind of the same rules as what every other drug has. Yeah, I'd say more so with like the argument against like making it illegal. I'd say it'd be more so with science that people, what you'd call pseudoscience, what they'd call real science. You know, it's what I feel like that would be a much bigger issue.
Yeah.
Or a more modern. Maybe that's it originated with like a more classist or racist connotation.
Oh no,
but then I think
I do not want to undermine the fact that racism has the classes that classism and racism has with this.
yeah, I'd say more classism today. I still. I
I see the
understand what you're
racism.
talking
Well, because
about
here's
with the
the thing.
racism thing.
Let
but-
me talk about why we criminalize things. So slavery is still legal
Okay.
as punishment for a crime. It's in the Constitution. You can't hold slaves unless it's as punishment for a crime.
Okay.
There are people right now working for 15 cents an hour because they're in prison, and they were in prison for having a joint on them and they got caught. And this disproportionately affects people of color. That is a fact. I don't have the statistics right now, but you can go and you can look at who gets arrested for cannabis. It is so that we can enslave people. It's so that we can put people in prison and work them for 15 cents an hour, and these people can make massive amounts of money from it. Because when you only have to pay 15 cents, that's nothing. Because these people are like, they're doing an important service that makes them profit, and they're not seeing any of that. So having an easy way to get people in jail is important. And that's one of the reasons, one of the biggest opponents of cannabis legalization is the private prison industry.
Yeah, see, I agree with everything that you said. I still just don't know where like the race comes into it. Like I understand like the putting people in prison for, you know, just having a joint on them, and I understand like the work of it.
Well, why do we target like it goes back to like the start of the US. Like it's like white supremacy, like this idea that we need to be subjugating these people. Like I this is kind of where my knowledge starts to end. And I don't. Last thing I want is to have a bad take about race.
Yeah, the cameras are on.
I am always, I'm always along my anti-racism journey, but at a certain point, like part of that is knowing when to just shut up.
Yeah, and I fear that too. Don't worry, I do too.
But I will say that cannabis criminalization affects people of color more than it does white people, and I couldn't explain why. It's the same reason that police violence is worse against people of color. It's racism. There are people out there who have these biases against people of color, and it sucks. It's awful, and we still allow it and we still normalize it, and we don't see it in the same way that we did, but it's still very much present. Like racism has not gone away. It's just taken on new forms, and one of those forms is policing and criminalizing these communities. So
yeah, there's definitely a movement that completely agrees with that take, and there's definitely a movement that completely disagrees with that take. And not knowing the statistics on hand of any of that, I'm not going to speak to
I'm actually
the
going to look
validity
that
of
up.
it.
Because I want to look at, because it's called the Last Prisoner Project, and they are a charity, excuse me, that is trying to get people out of prison for cannabis, for like nonviolent cannabis charges.
Yeah, and I think that's been a big part of the political movement of like legalizing marijuana is like beyond
no,
like
it needs to be legalized, and I think anyone, I think even like anyone who has a nonviolent cannabis conviction, they need to get out of prison immediately. And honestly, I think we should probably pay them reparations. But that's a whole
that's a whole other.
My service is really slow right now, but
It's poop down here. So.
Once this loads, these statistics, it is mind blowing. Like,
so
yeah.
Would you say that people of color use cannabis at the same rate as white people, but then they also get arrested for it at a disproportionate rate? Yeah, like I said, I don't know the statistics of it.
I'm going to connect to the Wi-Fi and look, because that's it. It's fact. This is straight up fact. And if you look at our prison populations, like Iowa is, I think, less than 10% of our population is Black, and I think 30% of our prison population is Black. That is significant. That is just, like, you can't ignore that. Like that's not that. Yeah.
I think what people would say about that is that despite their opinions on cannabis being illegal or legal, there's a knowledge that it is illegal, and that like you know that it's a crime before you commit it, unrelated to who you are. And I think people would say that whether or not they believe that it should be legal, you still know that it's illegal. And so if you know that's a crime, whether or not it should or shouldn't be a crime, you knew before, you took the risk for it.
Yeah,
and like that's like the punishment for it. You know what I mean? And
but why do we need to be punishing people for this? That's stupid.
Yeah, that would be the argument, less so than like putting race into it, because once you start doing that,
people of color are more likely to get caught.
Yeah,
and I will also say this: I have had encounters with police before, and the only reason one of the reasons that I am not in jail right now is because I look like a white woman, or I'm perceived as a white woman, and when these officers were looking at me, they saw, they reminded me of their daughter or of someone they loved, and a lot of people don't have that privilege. Like that, it's a fact. Like, yeah.
So the likelihood to get caught would be more like more of how I would word this like topic of conversation is that like people of color are more likely to get caught with it, not necessarily that they're more likely to get like jailed or something along those lines.
No, they're more likely to get jailed too.
Okay.
Our justice system is especially brutal to people of color. Like I said, like there are better sources on this than me. And I'm always down to like talk about the disproportionate effects that cannabis prohibition has on people of color. But like, I am not. I am a white bitch from Iowa. That is.
yeah.
And I need to be like.
If you want, you can send me that, and I'd love to read that, and then I'll read up on it, and then when we do like a second episode, we can like talk about like what we read. If you would rather, if it's not loading.
Okay. I'm going to find this. But I can also consider
the power to. You said that like when you set on something, you do it in your questionnaire. So I'm seeing it right now.
Not, okay, research and education. There we go. That's what I want. Because these statistics are so mind-blowing. I cannot find statistics. Okay. It's so staggering. Okay.
I'm ready.
This is from the ACLU.
Okay.
A Black person in Iowa is 7.3 times more likely to be arrested than a white person for marijuana possession, even though both groups use cannabis about the same rate.
Okay.
Iowa is 5th worst in the nation Okay, in 2018, Black people in Iowa were arrested at a rate of 776 per 100,000 of the general population, or the Black general population, compared to just 107 per 100,000 of the white population. So you can already see that there. In some counties, Pottawatomie County, 17 times more likely. Lynn County, where I'm from, Cedar Rapids, 10 times more likely. Let's see. A Black person in Iowa is 11 times more likely to be incarcerated. Like this, we have done studies on this, and we have shown that this is race. That we have controlled for all other factors, and this is a racial thing. And one way to solve that would be to stop arresting people for cannabis. It wouldn't solve the justice system's disproportionate effect on people of color, but it would help in this situation. And this is like, I'm not making this up. This is just straight up fact.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
there is definitely a racial factor here. It runs deep.
Yeah.
Really, really deep. Deeper than I think anyone can understand.
Yeah. yeah.
But it is like legalizing cannabis. It's a racial justice issue. Yeah, that's
I get where you're coming from, and especially when you read statistics like that, like I understand like the thought behind it.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I really try to assume the best in everybody, in all parties, and so
I do too.
Yeah, and so it's difficult for me to like say that it's like these cops are racist. It's difficult for me to say because I want to assume the best.
Because you do. Well, because most cops are not going around being like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna arrest only Black people today." Like that is not how it works. Mm-hmm. But it's unconscious bias. Like you're unconsciously I don't know how to explain this very well. I would encourage you, like I can share some literature with you about like this subject. But basically there is unconscious bias. And when you have that, you are more likely to think the worst of someone. Mm-hmm. And you're more likely to associate, criminality or like assume that they're doing something bad. And it's also, some of it is seeing people like it's just seeing people as less than human, as not equal to you. And we all have it. We all have it. I have it. You have it. Everyone has it. And it's awful. It's really uncomfortable, but you have to sit with that. Like you have to be like, because it's when you're not aware of it, that is worse. Mm-hmm. That means that you're not trying to change it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's absolutely a possibility. And that's the scariest thing. It's like, you could look at these statistics and your initial reaction is to be like, no, that's not true. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, like it is a possibility. And for like anybody who disagrees, you have to accept that it's at the very least possible. And like a lot of people will say like, no, that's not true. Mm-hmm. But it's like, no, it absolutely, like you do.
Where else would it come from? Like,
yeah.
I don't think that people are going out there trying to be racist. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like for me, the way that I would normally choose to look at it is like, these cops have been doing this for a long time. Mm-hmm. And so they kind of know what kind of habits people have when they might have something illegal on them.
But those can have racial associations.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I'm thinking.
It's like you might, for example, if you get pulled over, and for example, like if you're Black, the cop might be more likely to like search you. Like just they might not associate it with that. It's not okay. I would say that it's like there's less forgiveness, because I will say, when I was consuming cannabis in my apartment, my neighbors called the cops on me. I'm fine now, I'm whatever. But when these cops showed up at my door, like they could have searched me. They could have torn my apartment up. They could have arrested me and put me in jail, but they didn't. And it's that decision to not enforce these laws that is causing this.
Is there an age factor, do you think? Have they looked at age? Like maybe it's just that you're a college age person and so... they just
don't
like
know.
know, and then maybe like some of the people that are being criminalized are like 25 to like 40 or something. Do you think maybe there's an age in there too?
There could be, but I don't think so. I don't think it's significant. I've never heard of anything like that.
Like I heard about like a frat house. Frat houses all the time getting busted, and cops will
Well,
just go up and
that's
be
a
like,
frat house.
yeah, and they'll just be like, just pour it out. You know what I mean? Like nobody
Yeah.
gets arrested.
Well,
You
the
know?
way that we regulate alcohol versus cannabis is pretty different. But like
Yeah.
it's stigma and it's there's a lot of things. It's,
there's a
hard to
lot of
explain.
factors, and especially with human decision making and like how the human mind works, it's really difficult to figure out like what specifically is doing
Yeah.
this. Because I'm a psychology major, and like we're being taught this
Yeah,
stuff.
like we have these unconscious things that we do,
Yeah.
and it comes from a survival mechanism, and it also comes from like what we're taught as children.
Yep. And societally, like there's a ton of different factors, and I would try to stay away from pinning it on one thing.
Well,
but at the
there's
same
many
time,
things.
but at the same time, I wouldn't not pin it on that. You know what I mean? Like,
It's a significant factor.
but you got to strike like a middle ground of something that you don't necessarily know. You know what I mean? Like you can never know how
we do
someone's
know.
mind is working.
We do know because we have the statistics. I will say
I could hear
I am
those.
not a huge fan of centrism. I think centrists are just Republicans who want to keep their gay friends.
That's a good quote.
You can quote me on that. Because I would encourage all centrists out there. Like I understand the appeal of it, and they're like the appeal of like wanting to listen to everyone, but we've gotten to a point in our political system where one side is. It would be different if it was like not as consequential. But the reason I despise Democrats. I am not a Democrat. I'm registered
Let the
as one.
audience know.
I despise the Democratic Party. They are just as corrupt, just as racist and phobic and bigoted as the rest of as Republicans. They just hide it better. Like
This should have been your hot take.
I've heard it. No, a lot of liberals do not like the Democratic Party.
Really? Interesting.
Most of my friends are not huge fans. Like, because here's the thing. I've heard it described as this way. One side is trying to kill you. The other side is, doesn't want to kill you, but they're gaslighting you into thinking that they have your best interests at heart, but they don't. Like, they're just trying to keep the status quo. What are you going to choose?
Yeah.
You don't want to die.
Yeah.
So, which like this is coming to a point where it's actually killing people. Like anti-queer rhetoric. I mean, you saw like in Colorado when that guy shot up that gay bar. Like this rhetoric, this anti-queer rhetoric is killing people. So as a queer person, what am I going to choose? And when centrism is a huge privilege because it implies that you are not being negatively affected by the harmful rhetoric of the Republican Party and the right. And that's an important thing to reflect on. So
there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, I really do understand the appeal of it, but it's getting to a point where where compromise is like, it's not as possible as we would like to think.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that is annoying me about Democrats is this, we had a majority in both houses. All these people going around paying lip service to compromise. We should have pushed as much as we could have, because Republicans are not willing to compromise. We have seen this over and over. They are, but not really, and it's like life or death. It's becoming a life or death issue. Another thing I'm very passionate about is environmentalism and climate change. That is life or death, quantifiably.
I was just having a conversation with someone about this.
And there are people out there who would rather make oil money and die than change their habits and not be able to buy their third yacht or whatever and change their and not make as much money. And it's just so absurd. We have lost any sense of humanity or common sense in politics, and I despise it. I become more of an anarchist every day.
See, I completely understand what you're saying, but I would say that there's a middle ground that is really important to strive for, because the way that it was described to me, as far as politics go, is that you have to take little chunks of what you want until you get to the end goal.
I understand,
and it just takes time, because like you can go over here and say like, hey, this middle ground is like toxic because you need to be fighting for a side, and it's like,
unfortunately,
that might be true, but like,
yeah,
it's the only way to make change, because you're going to have
our
radical
oppressors
people.
are the people that are in power, and we have to kind of work with them a little bit.
Yeah, and
we
it's
have
like,
to convince them, and that's messed up. That's really messed up, that we have to go to the same people that have hurt us to ask for them to not hurt us. Like, that we don't have that power. But that's what we've come to. So,
especially with like the climate change specifically, it's like you have the right who is saying we should do nothing to help climate change, and you have the left who is saying we should do everything to stop climate change. And every bill that gets put to save climate change, the right will strike down. Every bill that gets put to like stop or to stop helping climate change gets struck down. And it's like,
it doesn't have to be that way, though.
Yeah, if we were to do in the middle, we could have been making progress. But both sides are trying to go to like the highest level. And it's like, there is a compromise that can be made, and then compromises can move in whatever direction, the United States thinks should be.
But the thing is if it was on something, because I would argue that a lot of like this anti-climate change, it's not based on fact. They cannot, like, this is not, it's fake, it's false, quantifiably. You can, like, I see it. You can go, like, I've lived in Iowa most of my life. I have seen the climate change. I remember it. Our growing seasons are 10 days longer. We can, like, we've measured this. In Antarctica, there's actually a really, and researchers in Antarctica at those research stations, there's a really high rate of depression, because they are seeing this firsthand. Our ice caps are melting. Like, we are flooding more. Like, it is happening. And there are people who are shoving their fingers in their ears and be like, I don't want to know, because I'm going to make more money. I want to make my money. I don't want to change. And I understand it's like a fear of change. Humans don't like change very much, but it's getting to a point where it's hurting people. And at what point are we going to stop saying, oh no, we need to compromise? Because the compromise is like, oh yeah, like, I'll let you kill me more. Like, I can't talk about this a terrible amount because it makes me really angry. I am deeply disenfranchised with the state of politics right now. And I would, yeah.
That's actually been like a pretty big topic about I feel like the biggest issue with politics is that it's so polarized that like conversation can't happen. Because people aren't able to find a middle ground, no ground is being made on any end.
One thing that I have noticed about liberals, and this is something I've realized too, is we see fact. We see these, like, yes, this is true, but we can't emotionally meet people in the middle. Because,
really? Interesting.
Which, for example, I have a lot of really homophobic relatives. I understand why they're homophobic, and I can, I can do things, like, if I can do things to maybe make them see like, oh, like, this is a queer person who's not like evil. And we have to, if we want change, we have to understand as liberals that a lot of times conservative values come out of hurt. Donald Trump took advantage of a lot of this, so
I can see the name spark fire in your eyes.
Okay.
You were talking about how sometimes it's hard to emotionally connect.
I know what I'm talking about,
okay.
But I'm trying to figure out how to word this. It's this idea of greed. And greedy people, specifically, I would say capitalists, which we don't need to get into capitalism like that. But for example, I'm going to use Appalachia. I have ancestors there, and I'm very interested in it, and it's something I really care about. For example, coal mining. Coal mining came in, destroyed the environment, destroyed people's bodies with black lung and these brutal work conditions. They did a lot of damage and then they left. Republican, like one of the things that they have done is make people think that it's not like one of the grandest deception, like the biggest deceptive schemes that anyone has ever pulled off was the way that Republicans made people think that it was, people of color and like minorities that were hurting them. It's like, oh no, it's not, like, for example, this idea that like immigration, like, oh, they're going to come and take our jobs. But if we didn't have people who were willing to pay people pennies to do their jobs, like if we had like, are you kind of getting what I'm saying here? Like if we didn't have people who were willing to do that, that wouldn't be the issue. It's the people in power that are the issue. It's not, it's like, it's kind of divided along class lines. Like people in power have all of this influence and they want to keep us divided. But if we, if all middle class and lower class people, like if we realize like, oh, we have a lot in common. I have a lot in common with, someone who's a broke Republican, because we're both abused by the system. We want something better, but it's messed up. Like the way that we have polarized people.
And so that's why it would confuse me when you said that, like, finding a middle ground, like, is toxic, like, or that isn't good. That's where it confuses me.
There's a difference between finding things that we have in common, which there's a lot of things that we have in common, versus, I guess it depends on the issue.
Yeah, because
if we're talking like, I don't know, I can't think of anything. But if we're talking something that doesn't hurt people quite to the same level, maybe the economy or something, I don't know. But unfortunately, politics has kind of, because for me, I'm a queer person, and I was assigned female at birth, and like it goes back to this, and now like it's either someone who's trying to kill me or someone who's going to gaslight me into thinking that they care. And the Republican Party and conservatives are doing things to oppress me and to oppress people that I care about. Like for like this, this nonsense with like banning books in schools. That is damaging. That hurts people, because I remember when I was a kid and I was still discovering myself and like figuring out who I was, having access to the limited queer literature that I did in high school, it was groundbreaking, because I could see people like me. People who felt the way I did, who was going through the things that I did, and it was comforting. And it made me feel less alone. And when you take these experiences out, you are hurting people. And you're giving, you're connecting a bad, you're saying these things are bad, basically. Like, what other reason would you ban a book from a school? And there's a lot of other things. I don't remember what state did it, but requiring teachers to notify parents if a kid talks about being queer or gay or anything. That's dangerous, because I don't know if you know very many queer people, but I have met people who have been kicked out of their houses. Like they were sleeping on a park bench because their parents kicked them out because they were homophobic. I've had it happen to me. My dad's side of my family does not talk to me. I have not spoken to them in 2 years. I have no contact with my father. Because I am queer, and because I don't fit in, like it hurts people. People are hurt by this, and it's hard to know that when you're not the one being hurt. And that's why that's like why most minorities are liberal, because it's we see this reality and we're like, oh, like it's life or death. So that's why I think that being a centrist is a big privilege.
Yeah, well, I understand as much as I can, like what you've said, having not experienced it. Like I understand what you're conveying, but you gotta understand that people who disagree with you, who feel the opposite, are coming at it within their mind the same emotional attachment.
I understand.
So like they're just as heated about it. They feel like it's just as important. You know what I mean? And so you have two people who completely disagree on things, and they're fighting at each other, and they feel just as emotionally attached to it. And what they think that they're just as right as you think you are. And so it's when you go at that conversation,
You have to honor it.
Like you have to
honor
understand
that.
like, hey, they're in the same position that I'm in.
Yeah.
They think they're in the same position as I am, but they don't know that they aren't.
But the difference is that a lot of this is based off of lies.
Yeah,
Which is that, like, if we want to talk conspiracy theories here, that's what this conspiracy theory is like people, like Republicans are trying to spread these, if Donald Trump did it, like he would say these outright falsehoods, like it was I heard it termed bottomless Pinocchio. Like the things he said were so objectively false, yet people believed it because it comes from pain. It comes from people who have been hurt by our system over and over and over. And, someone like Trump comes along and makes them feel like they have a voice. And it also comes from like religion Christianity has a big part. Are you familiar with the moral majority?
I've heard the term before, but explain it in this context.
So in the 80s, Jerry Falwell and a couple other people, Jerry Falwell is a big preacher. Like, I don't know exactly. He's a religious guy. And he essentially took Christian ideals and aligned them with the Republican Party. And he made those things one and the same. And when he brought religion into politics, essentially, and we're still seeing that today. It's people are holding these ideas with the religious fervor, and that's the emotion that they come at it from. And the emotion is the same, but the origin of it is different.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially when you think about it. But I think the issue that I'm coming to when you're like telling me about this is that the right is saying the exact same thing about the other side.
I've had that thought.
Yeah, and so what you end up thinking about is like, okay, we're both saying this exact same thing, and so like what they would say is, what gives you the right to say that this is objectively right? So when you say these things like these are objective facts, when they are probably, hopefully, and facts that I've heard that they're saying these facts are actually objectively right. And so then you kind of have to think, you're like, okay, now it comes to what best serves me as a person, what ideas are going to help me do whatever my goal is, to make the most friends, to have the most connections, to be the most successful, or to raise the best kids, or to whatever your thing
survive.
Is. Or like to survive the best, or have the most fun. Like whatever your idea is, you have to think, even politically, but like, what ideologies make me the most successful? And that's really what you have to think about. And that's why I say that, like, this centralist idea.
Actually not what you have to think about. That's a very self-focused, because it's actually not all about you.
Okay.
And my beliefs are not all about me. Because here's the thing. If I wanted to, I could vote Republican and I would benefit immensely. White women have some of the most privilege. Like, it's insane. You can benefit so much. Like if I just started crying, like a lot of people just like, oh, it's insane. And I would benefit from these because a lot of these things wouldn't hurt me if I wasn't queer. But the thing is they do, because I am queer. And I also am an empathetic person, and I can see the pain of other people, and I can see, like the things that we're doing are hurting people, and I care about people not hurting. My political beliefs are not based off of what's best for me. Some of it is, but it's like, I care about people. I don't want other people to suffer. I think that everyone has a right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And these things are stopping people from that.
Yeah, I didn't mean that what benefits you the most can't be helping other people. So that's not, I didn't mean that in like a selfish way.
No,
I mean
understand.
that like a lot of people's wishes and goals are to help other people and to be empathetic.
Yeah.
And I do believe that it does exist in the right wing as well.
Yeah.
Where like their goal is to help other people. They've, like if you were to think about like all the mainstream issues,
well, their conception
their
of what
position,
helps other people is different, though. Like,
yeah,
it's not actually helping. It's based off of. It's not actually.
And so that's where I'd say that like they believe that it's affecting. It's doing the same thing. And so like when you come at this issue, I do feel like a moderate approach is the best way to handle this, because both sides think that they are objectively right. Both sides have the exact same thought process behind it. They're just using different facts. One of them is wrong. One of them is right. They're using different logic. They're using different, they have different motivations for it. and you have to like take account into all these. And it's really difficult to genuinely take that into account if you are not in the middle and then moving to whichever direction you think is right.
I can honor someone's background and experience while also thinking that they're wrong.
Yeah, and that's what I'd encourage.
And that is, it's hard to do because these are the same people who would be perfectly willing to call me slurs and potentially, kill me. Like, it's happened. I'm not particularly worried about getting hate crimed, but like, it's a thought. There was a time like when I was in a relationship, there are certain towns where I would not have felt comfortable going with my girlfriend or with my ex with. And because and I've heard of it. I have a sibling who's queer and they got like McDonald's cups filled with water thrown at them. It's a thing. Like, people are hurt by this. And I also understand where they're coming from, but like, they're still hurting people and they need to be held accountable for their actions. But I can also honor why they're doing that.
Yeah. And the hardest part about it is people on the right would say that you would be hurting other people as well. And so like they'd find ways to say that like the LGBTQ community is hurting people. You know what I mean? And they would find ways to do that. And so they kind of have the same idea.
Yeah.
That like,
but what they're saying is actually not true.
And so like
it's the difference here that the feelings are the same and I honor that, but the reality that it's based on is different. Yeah.
And so that's where the conversation should start, is where I'd be like, hey.
Well, it needs to start with empathy.
Yeah, it starts with empathy. And that's what I'm saying. It's like you need to have empathy for the idea that like people are, they're coming at this with the exact same connection that you have.
And one thing that I have noticed is just being nice to people, because I'm in a situation where I feel comfortable sharing some of my more hot takes, but like if I was talking to like a Republican, I would not say this. And one of the things that I can do as like a liberal and a queer person and all these things is I can, like, one of the main things that that causes hatred is dehumanization. It's you see people as less than you, as less than human. And when you, like, there have been people, like diehard Republicans where their kid comes out and they're like, oh my God, like I am wrong. But that takes a lot of reflection. And I don't think our culture really creates one where it's safe for people where people feel comfortable admitting they're wrong. But it's important.
What would it take for you to admit that you could be wrong about something? Like, imagine.
Fact.
Okay.
If you showed me fact, something quantifiable,
would you be willing to admit that you are wrong? Okay.
I've done it before.
Yeah, good.
I love being proven. I mean, I'm a scientist. That's a huge part of research, is being willing to admit that you're wrong. It's really hard.
Oh, it sucks.
It's deeply uncomfortable. But for example, this is a situation with my mom, which my mom does this a lot. Like she's proven me wrong a lot. But there was a situation in my family where I was wrong. I was seeing something from a wrong perspective, and she told me, and I was like, oh. And that's hard. It was really, because it's so easy to stay mad. It's so easy to like cling to it. But that is, that's not a good trait, to not be able to admit that you're wrong. And it's something that I think some people struggle with it more than others, but culturally, because we punish people for being wrong a lot. Like we don't give people the space to be wrong. The stakes are pretty high. And that's another issue that I have with a lot of liberals is, we're really willing to just rip people apart for us. Like the queer community is really bad about this. And I'm not in online queer spaces, because you say one thing that could be even perceived as offensive, you're ripped to shreds. It's feral. It's awful. And
do you think that only exists in queer spaces?
It exists in a lot of. It's very.
That's what I'd say.
It's human
too.
nature. It's superhuman because it's like inverse. Like we want a group. We want to be safe. But that is not something that we should strive to, because in terms of our technology and our wealth and like the things that we have access to, we don't need to be that way. There's a piece of art I saw, and it's when you have more than you need, don't build a higher wall, build a longer table. If we were willing to cooperate instead of focusing on ourselves, we would be better off. But we're not, because we're I'd say it's culture, and like, and this has been for a very, very, I've kind of had this thought of like, where does this greed and like this self-focus trace back to? And like, you see it in Rome, in ancient Rome. And it's just this idea that like, it's about me and what I need, and I need to protect myself, and I need to fight and like kill people to protect myself. It's not true. I mean, sometimes it is, but it's the exception rather than the rule. And I mean, maybe this is idealistic of me, but I think we need a little idealism. I think we desperately need that.
So I want to end it with this, just because we didn't schedule this time, and so I don't know.
Man.
But that's completely okay. I love that. You can just
almost 2 hours.
Yeah, I love that you can just wrap this out.
Yeah,
I love that. I do want to say, what do you think the next steps are to, I guess, making everything that you just talked about better? What do you think, if you were to like look at the camera and say a PSA to the world to try to make it better, what would you say that goes? How'd you say that goes?
Smoke a joint and be nice to each other.
All right.
Just be kind. Just remember that we all wake up and take a dump in the morning, and we're all humans, and we all want the same thing. And it's security, and we all want to be safe, and we want our loved ones to be safe. Like, we all have these basic needs. Not everyone believes this, but we all evolved from a common ancestor. Like, we are so similar. And just having that basic empathy for people, that is so important. Yeah. And being able to step back and be like, even if all of these, because really the differences between us are constructed, and we can step back and be like, you know what, we're all human, and I'm going to respect your humanity, and as long as you respect mine. Like, if we just respect, like, so many people say that, and that is so much easier said than done. But people need to reflect and think. I mean, people need to smoke a joint and love each other. Like, it's hippies like love, like it's a thing. It's one of the things that cannabis has done for me, and I've seen it for other people. It just you realize, you're like, oh my, like it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Like, hatred, it takes more energy to be angry than it does to not.
Yeah, and that's why I think like, it's so nice that we are able to have this conversation, because I bet you if we were to write down like our beliefs and our views, they'd be very different.
Oh, I can tell.
And like, but to be able,
I know.
Yeah, just to be able to like sit down though and have like a conversation and like to let each other talk, to like let each other talk through it, and to like agree that like we are very similar, like more so than you'd think.
We're not that different.
Yeah,
like, really, we're not.
Yeah, and so it's really nice that like you're able to sit up here and have this conversation with me, because there's definitely like this perception that a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And so like,
people are though. It's like I really think people are.
And I'd say like conversations like this is what we should encourage, is like conversations to where like, even if you disagree, like to talk it through, like to have this conversation.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to think about what you said, and I'm going to have more empathy for people. And I hope that you're going to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Like, it's like conversation, like, 'cause it is human nature to be empathetic. We're a social species. We need connection, and when we actually connect, I think the internet has been a big factor in this, is disconnecting us from each other. But when we see each other's humanity, it's hard not to. When you're speaking to someone, you're like, oh man, like you need to think about, like, when you see someone, you can't not acknowledge their humanity. So it's having meaningful, honest, earnest connection with each other. And I actually think, this is coming down to astrology, but there are certain planets and stuff that can affect generations. And there's one, I don't remember what it is, but that is affecting like people like our age. And I don't remember, but it creates people who are like more willing to connect with each other and not be as divisive. And, astrology or not, there's a lot of reasons that I think that Gen Z and, a lot of younger people are so willing to be empathetic, is Perhaps we've just seen the negative aspects that not being empathetic has had, and we're tired of it. Like, empathy is beautiful and healing and very important, and just not being like, just stop. Just stop going around with fear. And this is one thing that when I learned this, and I'm still learning it, is assuming that everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. Nobody is out to get you. Very few people are out to get you, if anyone.
Yep. And that's what I was trying to say earlier as well. Yeah.
And doing that's my PSA. Everyone is doing the best they can with what they have. And remembering that it's not about you is what's important.
Yeah. I think we'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way.
But never
Felt
mind.
like no time at all.
That's what I said. These are the fastest hours of my life.
Yes.
Is when I do stuff like
yeah,
this. So,
wow.
Very quickly, any plugging you want to do for like any like social medias or clubs or organizations that you want people to?
I deleted all my social media. I'm going through a reckoning with my technology usage right now.
Get after
it. Join Normal if you want to see cannabis legalized. We meet, well, we're not meeting, but come see us at Club Fest.
Yep.
And we will get you information. It's a cool bunch. So I've met some of the coolest people I've ever met. Other than that, I don't know. Drink water. Stay hydrated.
Yeah.
Remember,
my water's emptier.
It's a hard. This for you, the listener. I'm talking directly to you. Stop. Get some water.
Yep.
Because you're probably dehydrated.
Yep. Stand up. Do some stretches.
Yes.
Yep.
Stand up. Yeah.
Love
yourself.
Breathe some air.
Self-love. Yeah. Man, that's so important.
Well,
I could sit and talk forever.
It was awesome having you, Abigail.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. I would love to do this again.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. All righty.
Okay.